Hi, I'm Ted Balaker with Reason TV, and today I'll be speaking with Lex McMahon. McMahon manages mixed martial arts fighters and is president of Alchemist Management. Lex, you've got a very interesting story about how you got into MMA. Tell me about it.
Yeah, sure. I was writing about MMA, and I was also doing some sponsorships for MMA. But I also negotiated a contract for my father, who was Ed McMahon.
The Ed McMahon of?
First and foremost, a colonel in the Marine Corps. Also happened to be a tremendous icon within the entertainment industry. But I negotiated a contract for him to be in a commercial for the Super Bowl. MC Hammer was in that commercial as well. And Hammer and I hit it off instantly on the set. And then one of the first conversations we had was about MMA. And you know, it really evolved from there. So we jumped in and launched Alchemist Management. And we're excited. Great things ahead.
And you manage roughly 13 fighters, right?
That's correct. We have a boutique firm where we focus on providing kind of a different level of service to the guys. It's the social media marketing. We have a PR firm that's on staff to us. We really give the guys kind of a higher level of service than what has been seen previously. And
you manage some big names like Nate Marquardt, Jorge Rivera. For those who aren't MMA fans yet,
will be soon.
Right. Who are some of your top fighters?
You certainly mentioned you know, some of the top guys. Nate Marquardt is one of the top 3 fighters in the world in his weight class. Nicest guy you'll ever meet. Brendan Schaub, who's fighting October 23rd, and his nickname's the Hybrid. Played professional football. Anthony Hardunk, Vladimir Machashenko. We have Jorge Rivera, the El Conquistador.
Let's take a step back and talk about what I think is the fascinating evolution of the sport. Early on, Senator John McCain called the sport what?
Human cockfighting. When the UFC came about, when mixed martial arts was really kind of coming more to the forefront, you know, rules were almost absent. No referee, no weight classes. It was two guys get in, one man leaves. That was sort of the mentality.
You could pull hair, you could hit the guy on the groin.
300-pound guy fighting a 180-pound guy. I mean, it really, because of those aspects, it was they weren't able to get sanctioned in many states. Ultimately, pay-per-view was no longer carrying it, so it became this pretty much cult-followed sport that was very difficult to market. But what happened was Dana White, the Fertittas, they got involved. They purchased the UFC, you know, some years back, and they've done a tremendous job evolving the sport, growing it, bringing it more mainstream. One of the first things they did was they added weight divisions. They added a referee.
So it's gone from human cockfighting to the fastest growing sport in the world, right?
It's the fastest growing sport in the world.
One of the interesting points you made was how there are market incentives to add some rules to bring it to a larger audience. You're not going to get beyond the hardcore cage fan folks unless you do that, correct?
No, I think that's absolutely correct. I mean, I think that what has begun occurring is that the rules have been put in place. You're getting a higher level of sophistication in both the business and in the athlete, as well as the folks that are working with the athlete. By taking control of an athlete's brand and helping them to develop themselves as more than just a fighter, you know, you begin to move away from the human cockfighting and helping people to understand that this is a professional athlete, but they're also, you know, in many cases, you know, great family people, you know, philanthropists doing a tremendous amount for their communities, and these are things that will help the mainstream sponsors embrace the sport.
You may be surprised. I enjoy the symphony from time to time, except the oboe. I hate the oboe.
And I think it's ironic that there was people like John McCain who are leading the charge against MMA in the early days are also big fans of boxing. And it seems to me that MMA is actually safer than boxing.
Because you can attack the entire body. You can do striking with both your feet and your hands, but you also go for submissions, takedowns, so there's less impact to the head.
And although there are rules now, there's still few and defined. You can't pull hair, you can't gouge eyes. There are clear rules on what you can and cannot do. But beyond that, it's let the best man win. And that's allowed for a lot of innovation in the sport.
Absolutely.
Where you see, can you talk about that? Because it wasn't that long ago where Royce Gracie seemed invincible, then Matt Hughes seemed invincible.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think what you see is, let's keep mixed martial arts. Okay, that means it's in embracing many different types of martial arts. In the early days, you know, as you brought up, Royce in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, that was kind of the lead martial arts within MMA because you could control the body, you could keep people down, it was an advantage to a smaller person. But once you started getting people kind of the same level of athleticism, the same level or the same size, the advantages of BJJ became less clear. As more and more true athletes have entered the sports, as opposed to just mixed martial artists, you know, now you're seeing professional football players like a Brendan Schaub come into the sport. You know, high-level wrestlers, you know, world champions, Olympic wrestlers like a Joe Warren, a Matt Lindland, Randy Couture, those sort of people. You know, they're bringing skill sets in and athleticism in that maybe weren't there before. And with that new level of athleticism, there's more creativity. Also, because the sport has grown so much, you're seeing a substantially greater number of people wanting to become fighters. With that greater number of people wanting to become fighters, you're seeing a broader sharing of ideas and concepts.
And you have such an interesting cultural mix too.
Sure. You get, you know, Vladimir Manchenko and Fedor from the former Soviet Union. You get Japan. You get Brazil. You get all these different fighters coming in, and they're all bringing in what their core disciplines were, but they're all having to learn new elements. You can't just focus in on one discipline anymore. I think that's why you've seen you know, the Gracies not be as successful as they once were, because the game has evolved so much and you can't be one-dimensional because the athletes that are coming, as I mentioned, are just so more explosive. John Jones, a great example. You know, he's 22 or 23 years old. He's the most explosive guy in the sport, I think, as a pure athlete. Or Rashad Evans. You know, he was a wrestler, but he's, I mean, one of the pure athletes in the game. George St. Pierre, again, another amazing athlete.
And you've got all these guys like George St. Pierre who, you know, look like he was chiseled out of granite or something. But then you've got Roy Nelson.
Sure.
Do you think that's part of the appeal of the game? Because it's so much about just results that you can have guys who are, I mean, Roy Nelson looks like he's 8 months pregnant, and yet he's still one of the...
I'm going to let that go. I like Roy.
Roy's got a party ball. He doesn't have a six-pack.
That's part of his appeal.
Right.
Because he's everyman. That's what makes him marketable. He's not a guy like Brock Lesnar who's so absolutely enormous that no one can relate to it, because there's so few people that are built in that manner. Roy's a guy who is very marketable. I think what it really boils down to is technique really does play a tremendous part in this sport. That's why it's not human cockfighting.
Who are your top pound-for-pound fighters? Not necessarily ones that you represent, but just in general.
Listen, as a fan, I mean, that's really how I came to the sport as a fan. I think you have to include George St. Pierre. Rashad Evans. I think there's no question that Rashad should be considered in that group. You know, I really do think that what you're going to see out of Nate in the coming fight and soon thereafter, I think people will quickly begin to say Nate Marquardt, Nate the Great, is one of the top pound-for-pound fighters in the world, without question.